So what we tried to do till now, if you recollect, that we have tried to trace the history of Sri Lanka in different epochs, and then we also tried to look for the diversity, uh, diversity, ethnic diversity in Sri Lanka. And then we started uh, looking for development of nationalism in Sri Lanka. We have tried to argue that three type of nationalism started. One was Sri Lankan nationalism. Sri Lankan nationalism was led by the ruling political party, United National Party, and it emerged during the freedom movement, which was very low-key affair. There was no freedom movement as such, but there were, of course, assertions from the political party. So the Sri Lankan nationalism was constituted by English-speaking Tamils, Sinhalas, and other Anglo-Indians who were there. And this was just after the British came to power, and they were, fighting against a common enemy, that was British. So that was the context in which Sri Lankan nationalism emerged. But along with that, there was this Sinhala nationalism, which emerged out of loss of, according to them, dignity to their religion, Buddhism, and loss of language, Sinhala. So they wanted that the religion, Buddhism, and Sinhala should be given proper respect. That was the context in which Sinhala nationalism started emerging, and that existed. The third was Tamil nationalism, which emerged out of self-perception and the loss they suffered during the different regimes. And because of that, they started asserting their political rights, their self-image in the history, and of course, the political processes. So these three nationalisms. Now, till Sri Lankan nationalism, or till British were there, or till United National Party in the beginning years, they were in power. The other two types, the Sinhala nationalism and Tamil nationalism, they were kept under check. But after 1956 onwards, this gap, the gulf between Sinhala nationalism and Tamil nationalism started growing. Now that's where we had stopped. And this widened so much from 1956, 57 onwards, that it led to civil war in 1983. And that civil war went for 23 years. And in 2006 only, when the Tamils, led by LTTE, were defeated, then and then only this could be solved. Now, our task is a little bit, elaborate, to look how this gap gradually widened and how did it come to the civil war. I think we will have to trace the history of this whole widening of the gap between Tamils and Sinhalas, and how the political parties play a dominant role, how the process of majoritarianism takes over, and how the minorities feel neglected, how the economic, political, educational, language, all those issues are tampered with, and some languages, some religion, they are given privilege and others are relegated to periphery. That's where I think again we can bring in our thesis of Ernest Gallner, that nationalism is the outcome of not only sentimentality, rather it is outcome of deprivation from the objective conditions as well. The second thesis which we can test also is that the development which takes place, and especially the development, the Western style of democracy and Western style of economic development that people depend upon, and dependency theory starts emerging also during this period in Sri Lanka. Now let us come to the widening of the gap. Why did this gap between Sinhala Buddhists and Tamil started widening? When did it happen exactly? What is the time period? Whether it was in colonial period or whether it was after the colonial period. One thing is very sure, that colonial people laid the foundation of divide and rule. That is what the theory starts emerging. Now, to begin with, we are talking about somewhere 1956 or 1950s, you can say, when the nationalistic phase of ethnic conflict between Sinhala and Buddhists started taking, greater shape, though it was kept under check. And we can see that these movements existed during the British period also, but they were under the check. There was a nationalist movement, which was of course a low-key affair, but the political demands were kept, and the political demands of the Sri Lankans were met with the British very easily. But undercurrents of Sinhala demands and Tamil demands, they existed. However, as soon as Sri Lanka got independence and Sinhala and Tamils, they both were let free, the two nationalism started gaining momentum. Now, in 1950s, this cleavage expanded like anything. Now, what are the events? I just want to underline so that these events become, sociologically, I think when we try to evaluate the emergence of nationalism, the social and political events that we have to underline, and that's why these events which I'm trying to now narrate, I think these are very important. During this decade, 1950s, Buddhist revivalism in the political sphere, that found itself in a very, very potent voice in the two important organizations. The two important organizations which were formed to raise the issues of Buddhists. One was Buddhist Committee of Inquiry. Buddhist Committee of Inquiry. These were, this is a pressure group, which was a pressure group, independently organized, unofficial body, and it comprised both of, laymen, prominent Buddhist monks, and so on and so forth. So this body appointed a independent body appointed. Now, what did this body ask for? They wanted to have an inquiry into the state of Buddhism. What is the status of Buddhism in Sri Lanka? This was one very important committee. The second committee is the United Front of Buddhist Monks. United Front of Buddhist Monks. Now, this body, the first body, gave its inquiry report in 1956, and they entitled, very provocative title was given to the report: Betrayal of Buddhism. Betrayal of Buddhism. Now, already a conclusion was drawn in the report that, look, Buddhism has been betrayed. Now, this report, that means, was a very, very serious indictment of the ruling United National Party. United National Party, which was considered to be secular party, which was considered to be the harbinger or carrier of the Sri Lankan Tamil. It was a Sri Lankan nationalism. It was neither Snhala or Buddhist, but it was a united effort of the people, where Buddhists and where Tamils, where Moors, they were all there in this party. So this was a serious indictment to a nationalist secular party, and they started actually saying that, look, this is a pro-Christian party. There is a Christian bias in this United National Party. And therefore, this committee put certain demands in front of the government. I just want to give you few demands so that you should know that how majoritarianism starts asserting itself. One was creation of Buddhist governing council. What they call was Buddhist EU. This was, they called it as BUDDHA, 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 Buddha Sasana. Sasana, S-A-S-A-S, Sasan, S-A-S-A-N-A. Sasana. Buddhist, Buddha Sasan Council. So Buddha Sasan, that is Buddha governing. Sasan is governing here, governing council. That is one. The first demand, Buddha Sasana Council. The second was repeal of the section in the Constitution dealing with the protective clauses pertaining to minorities. All the protecting clauses pertaining to minorities should be removed from the Constitution. The third was takeover of all the government-aided schools and training colleges by the state. So you take all the government colleges and the training college. All the private schools should be taken away. We have already done that, how private schools were developed by Christian missionaries, by the minorities, and they were given 60 to 65% of the schools, and the wards, they were all non-Snhala and non-Buddhist, and therefore there's a takeover that. Then they also put a demand that they should remove Sunday holiday by another holiday that is known as Poya holiday. Poya should be a weekly holiday. This is the auspicious day for Buddhists. And the fifth, they also put a demand that termination of all the services of Christian nuns working in government hospital. Termination of services of Christian nuns working in government hospital. So these were few demands which I am trying to argue, which speaks of Buddhist chauvinism against the minorities. Now, another event of Buddhist Snhala celebration, or you can say ethnocentric celebration of Buddha Snhala, was in 1956, commemoration of 2,500th death anniversary of Buddha. 2,500th death anniversary of Buddha. It was celebrated. And also, there was a celebration that this is the year when the arrival of Snhala race takes place on the island. So Snhala race arrived during this period, and therefore it has to be celebrated. Now, by this celebration, what do you mean? What the message was given to the minorities? By this celebration, Buddhism was projected to have a special meaning in the life of the island as a whole. Isn't it? Quite comparable situation in contemporary India. And Snhala had the actual legitimacy to guide the destiny of the country. Why? Because they are the original race of the island. It is they who will guide. This was the message which was sent to the minorities. It is, it is true that these celebrations were held with the government patronage. So government patronized all this. And now after that, government also start pronouncing pro-Buddhist policies in subsequent years. And this established that Snhala Buddhists have a legitimacy to govern Sri Lanka or nation. Now, it is here that it is here that just after independence, 8 years of independence, 1956, Bhandar Naike, you know, I don't think I have to spell it. Bhandar Naike, because so many spellings are there, but I will write one what I have. Bhandar Naike, SW, because there will be another Sri Mao Bhandar Naike. So SW RD Burman, Bhandar Naike. Now, SWRD Bhandar Naike, he became the prime minister, and he came to the power, and Buddhist chauvinists found in him a leader who was willing to identify himself with their sentiments. This is the third general election I'm talking about. He committed himself to the commandments which were given by the Buddhist clergy. And these commandments were, of course, a sort of a 10-point charter which was given to them, and in which he was supposed to show that he is a devout supporter of these demands. Some of the charter of demands, you know, I've given you earlier, but this was Buddhist specific demands. Now, one very specific demand which became detrimental for the other minorities and really which created lot of wedge animosity in Sri Lanka was Snhala only policy. Snhala Snhala only policy. That means Snhala should be the only language, official language. Now, there was also another demand that there should be a ministry of cultural affairs. And for the first time, it was created in the history of Sri Lanka, though history was not very long after that. Now, therefore, during Bhandar Naike's period, the Tamils felt very fearful, and they saw the suppression of their interests in every field. And the decision of Bhandar Naike government, the community, politically as well as economically, the three very important areas in which the decisions of Bhandar Naike government influenced, they were language, education, and settlement. Now, Bhandar Naike made Snhala the sole official language in 1956. Now you can compare India, how British made English as a language. Now here, Snhala the only language. Second, he abolished the denominational representation. Denominational representation was given to the minorities in different institutions, and he removed that in 1960. And he introduced another system, that is weightage system. in the technical and higher education. Now, with this, we see that how the Tamils' interests were affected materially and educationally. Culturally, the sponsored settlement scheme where the Tamils were already living, there was a sponsored settlement scheme. Now, this really hurt the Tamil. Now, once the community was culturally, materially, educationally, linguistically, and spatially, that is geographical space, the settlement, was feeling hurt, feeling deprived, and that's where the rise of Tamil separatism started. They observed, Tamils started observing systematic encroachment upon the rights of the Tamils. Just after independence, it was happening. Now, let us come to a little bit, further. Now, once this happened, once this encroachment started happening, the Tamilians started asking for autonomy. The struggle for autonomy started. And that's where the political parties, especially the in the classroom, you could wait easily, but not here. It looks all wastage of time. In the classroom, you can wait. So this political parties which were formed during this period, they wanted the two demands of the Tamils. The first objective was to achieve autonomy for the Tamils so that their cultural and economic interests were safeguarded. And second objective was a unity among the Tamil speaking people should be established. And the party which was there in question was Freedom Party. So the political, maneuvering for autonomy and unity among the Tamil speaking people. So Tamil speaking people unity is important. Why? Because then there were Muslims who were speaking Tamil. There were also Moors who were those who were indigenous people. They were also, Malay was also speaking some of the Tamil. So what happened? If you can have a unity among the Tamil speaking people, your number would go up and your bargaining power will also increase. That was the type. But, you can go beyond your caste and creed. But what happened between 1956 and 1972? There were several rounds of talk with the Federal Party and also Sinhala Buddhists, but Buddhist chauvinism did not budge, and they tried to sabotage the whole development. Now, during this period, I think it's important to note down what happens. That the first prime minister, the Bandar Naike, who was the opposition prime minister for the first time. Otherwise, United National Party was ruling. Now, Bandar Naike was assassinated. His wife came to power, Srimavo Bandar Naike. His wife came for the first time, 1960. After 5th general election, Srimavo Bandar Naike became world's first elected prime minister. So she was, she was not very politically astute as such. She was more of a, she had come to power on the sympathy wave of her husband's assassination, and also she was belonging to a royal family, Candian royal family. So she had no political experience, but she was, governed by some people who were very ruthless. Now, during this period, one of the very important movement emerged, and this was youth movement, JVP. JVP. This was the youth movement. JVP movement was a youth movement led by many youth, communist youths, Sinhala youths, and also, many other people. JVP is Janata, Janata, Janata. Vimukti. Okay, this is Janata, People's Freedom Party, JVP, a youth. Now, it is important to note that it emerged during Srimavo Bandar Naike's period, and she very ruthlessly crushed this movement. She very ruthlessly crushed this movement. This we have to keep in mind. This was a Sinhala movement, and this she crushed. Now, but what happened that she got help of the communists during this period, and therefore what happened that she did not care for the Tamils. When she was not caring for the Sinhalas and she could suppress them, then what to say about the minorities? So it's very important that we should note Srimavo Bandar Naike's period, that was a very important period, very crucial period in widening the gap between Sinhala Buddhists and Tamils even further. Okay. Now, having said this, the whole Federal Party movement and whole Sinhala Buddhist chauvinism and the way Srimavo handled this created the wedge. Now I come to the third actually epoch here, and that is 1972. Now, it is important that we said that in 1972, Sri Lanka gave its new constitution, gave itself a new name from Ceylon to Sri Lanka, but another internal socio-political event which took place was formation of Tamil United Front. Tamil United Front. TUF. Tamil United Front. This was formed also in 1972. Now, in this, what happened that the two earlier political parties, the FP, the Federal Party, and the Tamil Congress, they merged together and they formed a united party. This is 1972. The TUF started. They started mobilizing and started sounding separatist. 1972. Apart from historical reasons, we have argued that there were contemporary reasons. Now, the most immediate reason, the most immediate reason after the formation of 1972 Constitution. In the Constitution, the new Constitution was also exclusionary, and therefore the Tamil youth became impatient. We had just given you that in 1972, what was actually there for minorities, that we have to see. On the one hand, we could see that there was a Snhala only, and Snhala only policy continued. Second, there was a special status for Buddhism in the state. On the other hand, it also contained provision to protect the rights of the Buddhists. The most important clause which existed in the earlier constitution before 1972 was safeguarding the minorities from discrimination. Now, this legislation was removed in 1972. And therefore, there was anxiety. The second aspect, very important, was the Tamil youth. The Tamil youth was really in doldrums. They were suffering economically. As I told you that there was Sinhali only language, and because of that, they lost in jobs. Because they had Tamil, they had English, but not Sinhala. And therefore, it was a very, 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 very great loss of employment also. They lost denomination, in denominational aspect also they lost, because there was no specific thing. So youth organizations, including TUR, youth organization became more and more critical to constitutional amendments which taken place, and they started somewhere saying that constitutional path for solving Tamil problem is not possible. Tamil youth for the first time took this stance that solution for Tamil problem is not through constitutional way. And therefore, Tamil youth started prescribing direct militant action. One of the direct militant action which was prescribed by Tamil youth was that they should indulge in violence, and they started indulging in violence also. Murder of police and administrative officers is started. Bank robberies also started. Now it is here that in 1974, a very important event in the history of Tamil mobilization took place. I'm again talking about a cultural event which was giving a nationalistic fervor for Tamils. That was organized 1974. This was a conference organized, International Conference on Tamil Studies, International Conference on Tamil Studies in Jaffna. And this became a landmark episode in the development of Tamil youth extremism. International Conference of Tamil Studies became a landmark episode in the development of Tamil youth. So why I'm trying to argue this is again a sociological reason which comes to fore, and that's why we are talking about sociological perspective. Had it been international perspective, we would have done IPKF only and we could have done some international events. But we are trying to argue that how sociological reasons became cause for separatism. Now, therefore, growing, there was already economic reasons, because there was more unemployment for the Tamil youth, as they had lost their reservations, what you call denomination representation. They had lost on economic, they have lost on linguistic ground. They have also lost on discriminations. The law against discrimination was taken away with. Now, because of this, the youth became further separatist, and along with the employment rampant in Sri Lanka, they were suffering. Further, Snhala only policy contributed, and therefore, from 1976 onwards, a very new strategy, and that strategy was documented strategy that took place in the separatism of Sri Lanka. Now, in 1976, TUF, Tamil United Liberation Front. How TUF transforms into TULF, Tamil United Liberation Front. And TULF gave a motto, direct motto. They organized a conference, and in the conference, they passed a resolution of secession from Sri Lanka. Now, this resolution argued, and I want to read their resolution. The resolution says, the Republican Constitution 1972. The Republican Constitution 1972 has made the Tamils a slave nation. The very harsh word. The Republican Constitution 1972 has made the Tamil a slave nation ruled by the new colonial masters, the Sinhalese, who are using the power they have, wrongly, usurped to deprive the Tamil nation of its. Now they said, what is it? Deprivation of its territory, one, deprivation of its territory, language, citizenship, economic life, opportunities of employment, and education. So the Constitution has deprived them, thereby destroying all the attributes of nationhood of the Tamil people. And in the end, the resolution concluded that the restoration and reconstitution of the free, sovereign, secular, socialist state of Tamil Ilam. Reconstruction of free, sovereign, secular, socialist state of Tamil Ilam has become inevitable in order to safeguard the existence of the Tamil nation in the country. Okay. Now these are very important issues. Now these are very important points that should be noted. Okay. Now what happened to TUF? TUF had been formed into TULF. Now what happened to TUF? Because in TUF there were Indian Tamils and the Ceylon workers were there. So the two political parties, you can say, Indian Tamils and the Ceylon workers, etc., they were there in that organization. But these organizations, the Indian Tamils and the Ceylon workers, some of the minorities, they did not support the demand of a separate Tamil state. Rather, they wanted their rights, relative mild rights, that there should be educational rights, there should be citizenship rights, there should be some minimum wages, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, this is a very important development in the history of Tamil separatism. Now, in 1977, there was a real ethnic fight, ethnic strife, which really starts taking place. And especially the popularity of TULF. What happened to that? That we have to see. Now, in 1977, there was a, you can say, elections, parliamentary elections, and TULF gained a lot of room in the northern area, and that shows its popularity went up. But it had less popularity in the east. Now this result, TULF, we can see that TULF in northern provinces, they got 65%, 68% of the votes, and therefore their popularity went up. But in the other areas, in the Muslim majority areas, they did not win. I'm not going into further detail, but what is important for us that in 1977 elections, the TUF, that is United Tamil Liberation Front, became the largest party in the opposition in the Sri Lankan parliament. Now, under these circumstances, there was communal riot in 1977. That again further laid down the separatist aspect. And 300 people died or killed, and therefore, Tamil separatist nationalism further got strengthened. After 1977, we come to the another epoch, and that was 1978. 1978. Again, a new constitution was promulgated, and also now the parliamentary system becomes presidential form of the government, centralization of power. But there was no change in the deteriorating condition of the ethnic relations. Now, in this Article 19 of the 1978 tried to reconcile little bit. What was the reconciliation? They said that Tamil and Sinhala will both be national language, but official language will not change. Official language will be Sinhala, but national language Tamil will be. So there was some, cajoling. Second, Article 26 abolish the distinction between citizens by descent and citizens by registration.
This was which article?
26, Article 26 of 1978 Constitution. Now, again, if you start looking this, that in this whole commotion, nothing is coming to the minority side as such, because Sri Lankan Tamils were much more treated at par with the other citizens. But if you see, Sri Lankan Tamils were citizens by descent, so it was nothing absent. But there were, of course, some stateless people, Indian Tamils who were there. They were granted equal status. This again proved detrimental to the Sri Lankan Tamils. Why? Because they were being now treated at par with the Indian citizens, the Tamils. Now, we can keep this change in mind, the government attitude of the Tamils. I think we should elaborate this a little bit in proper perspective. What was exactly the government with 1978 Constitution was eyeing on? You have to read in between the lines, basically. What is the real impact? It has been argued by the social scientists that Sri Lankan government took these steps to wean away Indian Tamils from joining the Sri Lankan Tamils. Isn't it? When they were given citizens, because they were fighting with the Tamils, Sri Lankan Tamils, to get the citizenship. Now, they have already got the citizenship. Now, with the citizenship, they have got other rights as well. So why they should be aligning with the Sri Lankan Tamil? So one was this, okay. Now there was other, development which I don't think that we just want to do that. But what you can say that there was something. President President Jayavardhane wanted that there should be a commission and 10-member commission. There should be commission on the Tamils, and that should be looking after the exclusions, the settlement, the education policy, and so on and so forth. But TULF resolved not to participate in the commission. Why they did not participate in the commission? Because they argued that the commission did not contain any reference to the solution of the minority problems. It is just like it is beginning afresh. So the commission, or Jayavardhane, is basically Jayavardhane's effort did not bring anything. The language issue at large remained. The educational opportunities did not change, and employment also did not change. If you take one of the data to prove the point, 1978 in employment, it said that the Sinhalese occupied 60% of the government posts, and Tamils had 30% only, and for others it was 10. So there was not much which was there for the Tamils. Now it is here in 1981. We have come till 1981. We're not very far from the Civil War. We are now 81. Now in this District of Developmental Council Act was formed in 1981. District Development Council Act in 1981, and which gave, it is said that, which gave considerable autonomy to the 24 districts over economic development. But in reality, this act was a device to create a unitary structure of governance. How was it done? Unitary structure of governance. How was it done? It was done through centrally appointed officers, and each district had a minister of state appointed by the central government. So again, the rule of the central government was there. Now, all this arrangement did not give any autonomy to the Tamil dominated districts as desired by the Tamils at that time. And in economic condition also, the economic policy of the Jayavardhane government from 1977 to 1981, they also proved detrimental to the Tamils. Now, they introduced a free economic policy, free import economic policy, and the free import of food items like chilies, potato, onion. All this adversely affected, chilies, potatoes, onion, adversely affected the Tamils. Why? Because particularly Tamils grew all these articles in Jaffna. They were in majority, and therefore it proved detrimental. The subsidies which were given, they were only given to Sinhala population area, and it is said that 70% of the subsidies which were given that came into Sinhala population. Therefore, Jayawardhane's economic policy were also harmful to the Tamils. Last but not the least, public jobs. The public job policy, that was also detrimental. According to statistics in 1977 and 1981, out of 9,965 persons recruited, 9,965 persons recruited in the clerical services. Out of 9,965, 9,326, that means 93.3 were Sinhalas, and only 4.9 were Tamils. So what was the combined impact on the Tamils? The economic plight of the Tamils, the failure of political parties to do justice to the Tamil. What happened? That militancy of the Tamil youth grew. And during Jayawardhane's regime, it became a very distinct phenomenon. Guerrilla movement started during this period. Guerrilla movement of unprecedented scale started. So we can see that the liberation of the United Tamil Liberation Front, I think it's very important. How did it change to LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam? It was formed in 1978, May 1978. And along with it, there were, many other, at least, five or six militant groups were there. They were found. But by 1986, LTTE became the most dare and the most important militant organization. How did it emerge as one of the most important group? There were 6 active groups during this period. How did it eliminate 5 others? This is another phenomena which you will read later on. But just I want to repeat that in 1983, by 1986, what strategy LTTE adopted was that LTTE killed the leaders of other groups. It is said that some 200 leaders were killed. Some of the leaders were killed in Madras, India, by LTTE. So they killed that. Second, some of the groups, because they were heavily dependent on India, and when after 1991, especially when India stopped assistance to these groups, these groups resorted to abducting people, murdering people, common people, or robbery, and therefore they lost their legitimacy with the people. So on the one hand, their supplies of arm, money, and training stopped from India, and on the other hand, they themselves lost the legitimacy. So these other groups, they were eliminated. So in three ways these groups lost. One, LTTE murdered their highest leaders. Second, actually they did not get assistance from India. And third, they lost legitimacy. So in this way, LTTE became the most important and most potent aggressive group to lead. Now, one thing is important to note, that though these 5 or 6 groups, they were having difference of strategy, they were also having different area of domination, but they have one thing in common. They have one thing in common, and that was they sought an armed revolution for the Tamil Eelam. They were one common aim, and this was nothing but that they wanted a common revolution, armed revolution. Now, under these circumstances, that from 1983, the rise of LTTE led to civil war. And it has been argued by Patrick Pebbles that there was an atmosphere of confusion in 1983. And this confusion was, of course, because indecisiveness of the political masters, their policies, changing of the constitutions, removing number of articles. And therefore, important point to note here is that along with the confusion, the Sri Lankan police was undermanned. It was small in number, and therefore they were unable to prevent the politically motivated crime led by the militants. Now, political prisoners joined first. Political prisoners joined LTTE. Second, there were some youth who were unemployed youth. They started joining. The dispossessed Tamils also joined. Now, it is said that by 1984, there were some estimated 2,000 armed extremists in the camps. And ultimately, under the leadership of Velu Pillai, Prabhakaran. There is one name, Prabhakaran. Prabha, Prabhakaran. Prabhakaran. This is one name, Velu Pillai Prabhakaran. Under his leadership, LTTE became the only potent force. And as the LTTE became stronger, it systematically destroyed its opposition and it killed the opposition itself. Some 200 opposition group members of even, Tamil Liberation Organization, TILO, the Tamil Ilam Liberation Organization. This was one of the competing organizations. He killed 200 members of that. Later, it also attacked other groups. And then in July 89, it murdered one of the most important leader of the Tamil Ilam, Amrit Lingam. Amrit Lingam. You can read, I think, this very respectable person, and he killed them also. Now, what happened to the, I told you the militant groups, how they lost. Now, coming to the very last point of it, that by 1986, it had emerged, but 1997, we see that 1987, we see that India sends the peacekeeping force. And it is said that in February 1988, there were 72,000 troops of IPKF, India Peacekeeping Force. And India Peacekeeping Force, IPKF, spent $1.25 billion. $1.25 billion. But they could not defeat LTTE. One of the, we can see that gradually LTTE covered some 15,000 acres of area, established its army and also its parallel polity. But one of the most heinous things they started doing in 1990. One of the strategies which LTTE, after the IPKF left, they started ethnic cleansing of Muslims in the districts under their control. Ethnic cleansing of the Muslims they started. And worst event took place on August 3, 1990, when LTTE cadres massacred 120 Muslims at one prayer in the mosque, and they injured another 100. Some of them died. After that, in October 1990, Prabhakaran ordered the Muslims living in that area that leave within 5 days. That means he said that on 23rd October, he said that you should leave by 28 October 1990. And he said that nearly 17,000 families were driven out. Now, gradually, it established its whole area, that is 15,000 kilometer squares land, and started parallel government with its own military and polity. Now, it is here another sociological question which emerges is that how did LTTE mitigated the differences of caste and class within itself and marched towards an ethnic identity? What was the mechanism which the Sri Lankan or LTTE people, because you know, if you read, I will give you this article of Tudor, I think it is Tudor, what is the name? Yeah, Tudor Silva. Kalinga, Kalinga, Kalinga Tudor, Tudor, Tudor Silva, Tudor Silva. You know, he has read he has quoted one of the very important Pfaffenberger. 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 He quotes that he cites that, look, actually there was in the Tamil dominant area in Jaffna, there was dominant caste-like structure, and the Vellalars, they were dominant caste. Vellalars were the dominant caste, and they dominated that area, and therefore they mistreated untouchables, and they tried to create their hegemony. Pfaffenberger also quotes about the temple entry crisis, that when the untouchables of the Sri Lanka wanted to enter into the temple, the Vellalars elite did not allow them to enter in the temple, and they suppressed that movement violently. Violence was used. And when the Sri Lankan government tried to intervene, the Tamilians argued, the Vellalars elite argued, that you are trying to interfere in the internal matters of community. You should stay away. Now, Tudor Silva argues that, look, this type of division existed within the Tamilians. So how did Sri Lankan Tamils submerge their caste identity differences? And how did they come up? Now, for this, Tudor Silva quotes that we have to go to the undivided, the Tamil Nadu culture, of a tradition, a long tradition which was followed in Sangam era. Sangam era, you know, Tamils have a Sangam era in which there have been a cultural revolution. And it has also, Sangam literature is also very ancient literature. So now in this, there is one very important event which the Tamilians in Tamil Nadu and Sri Lankan Tamils in Jaffna, they have the similar type of cultural activity, and that cultural activity is This is a very important event, cultural event, which is basically organized in this. Yes, Sumitra.
I'm so sorry, sir. It was mistaken.
Acha, it's mistaken. Okay, because it says that you have raised the hand. Okay, so this Iradda Tilagam is nothing but, you know, putting a spot on the forehead of the tiger hero. Tiger is basically hero of that time in the, so you put a blood spot after cutting your finger in the public, and you put a spot there. So this blood spot is a deep, it is an embodiment of deep commitment to the liberation struggle. Irakta Tilagam, that is Rakta Tilagam, that is blood spot, is considered to be deep commitment to the liberation struggle and to express a common identity of the militants. And also it identifies a notion of common identity derived from a common blood, derived from a common blood. So this creates a common, it creates a common blood ties as well as in the common culture of Tamilians. And this LTTE movement indicates that this was adopted by the Tamil LTTE in their culture. That means LTTE prescribed a change in the hierarchy, the caste hierarchy, the class hierarchy, and these hierarchies were, if not eliminated, but they were definitely loosened. And in place of that hierarchy, that religious culture, there was this symbolic culture of Rakt, Tilgam, and blood ties that dominated. This created, instead of a vertical hierarchy, this created a horizontal comradeship among the Tamilians. Instead of a vertical hierarchy, rather it created a horizontal, and this brought ethno-nationalism to the fore. So the caste was forgotten, the class was forgotten, religion was forgotten. Rather, there was one sacrificing national comradeship which started. One commitment, fundamental cultural and socio-political unity of the Tamils, fundamental cultural and socio-political unity of Tamil people, conceptualized within the nation of Ilam. A Tamil homeland devoid of caste, class, and other forms of inequality. So in this way, we can see that how ethno-nationalism, cutting across the caste, religion, linguistic boundaries, were brought with the performance of a cultural trait of blood spot. The article is basically by the article of Kalinga Tudor Silva is caste, ethnicity, and problem of national identity in Sri Lanka. Caste, ethnicity, and problem of national identity in Sri Lanka. Now, once this was done, but as you know that there was a growing intolerance within LTTE, and they were really becoming very nasty to different groups, and therefore internationalization of the civil war started taking place, and different groups within the LTTE also there was division. For example, you see at international level, the Tamil diaspora, because LTTE was declared a terrorist organization, the Tamil diaspora in different parts of the world is stopped funding. Just take one example, that is 2006. In 2006, the Tamil diaspora in Canada, it is said that somewhere 160,000 Tamil Canadians, 160,000. Tamil Canadians, they are there. But because in 2006, the newly elected conservative government declared LTTE as a terrorist organization, and therefore it was not surprising that the Canadian diaspora or Tamil diaspora in Canada stopped funding. There was division in 2006 also. Some of the groups within that, they, especially the way LTTE murdered their senior leaders, Amritalingam and others, they also dissociated. A group of people, they said that no, we are no more separatists. They started helping. They started helping police instead. The LTTE people, those who have gone out. Also, the international support was withering away for them, and therefore we see what happened, that gradually there was weakening of LTTE. In 2006, the LTTE started weakening, and it is this time that we see a new government is taking place. Mahendra Rajpaksa is being elected, and therefore his brother leads a war against LTTE in 2006. And 2006 to 2009, this war eliminated most of the troops of LTTE. Even it is said that Prabhakaran was also killed in the war, and once the leader was killed, the whole war was over. In 2009, that is 26 years after it started, civil war in 1983, in 2009, ultimately the war ended with the killing of the leader of the LTTE. Lot of international pressure came on Sri Lanka of violation of human rights. And we all know that this is an important aspect. Now, what are the lessons we draw from this? What are the most important lessons in democracy and governance which we draw from this civil war in Sri Lanka. And we can say this, that the political experience of Sri Lanka suggests that neither ethnic predominance, nor a strong executive government is guarantee for establishment of successful democracy. I repeat this. The political experience of Sri Lanka suggests that neither ethnic predominance nor a strong executive government is guarantee for the establishment of a successful democracy. You remember what happened? That ethnic predominance was given to Snhalas, and then a strong executive government in 1978. Presidential form of the government was there. So they thought that a centralized presidency will be a strong government, but it did not happen. Therefore, parliamentary government may in some conditions be faced with the problem of instability. We can say this. Parliamentary form of government, they face instability, yet the accommodation and consensus which the political democracy brings, it's very, very important for, or it is good for national integration in multicultural society. So for multicultural society, accommodation is very important. Consensus building is very important. If there is accommodation, if there is consensus, then national integration is going to take place in a multicultural society. You cannot privilege an ethnic group who is in majority. You cannot think that a strong government, a strong centralized government can govern and there will be democratic nation. No, that is not. This is what the political experience which tells us. So I think sociologically, we have traveled a very long distance in which we have seen how nationalism emerged, how nationalist government took place, how ethnicity has played a dominant role, how ethnic cleansing has taken place in Sri Lanka, and the evolution of Sri Lanka as a democracy has oscillated again between democracy and the presidential form of the government, and then emergency. Number of time of emergency have taken place also within the. So when you read, I think it will become more clear. Now this is what is basically development of nation democracy in the civil war infested country Sri Lanka. That's one very important argument which we wanted. Now the last point, which I think can we carry on with this? Because last point, Sri Lanka, is economic development. I think if we can do it later also, but I think already it is 1.5 hours. So you will be tired. But economic development is important to look into, and then only how socialist government comes. So the socialist government tries to nationalize all the resources. Then there is actually globalization and privatization takes place, how that happens in that area, and how privatization has impacted the different areas of the Sri Lanka. I think that will be a small part of economic development that will complete Sri Lanka from my side. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you